Hi everyone. I wanted to create a couple of videos to show you how I would go through an abstract if it were me. I know we did a really quick abstract review in our last meeting, but I just wanted to give you a couple more opportunities to kind of see how I would navigate it, and hopefully give you a chance to think about the sort of questions you might want to ask yourself when you're going through them. So I am going to share my screen, and we're going to talk about this grant, which I had mentioned to you a little bit in our last meeting, which, you're going to get a grant that comes up like this when you open it. This, again, they are all from the Public Health and Primary Care divisions of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And now we're scrolling down to the title of the project. Effectiveness of theory-driven mobile messenger-initiated multimedia reminder on adherence to repeat mammography in breast cancer screening, a randomized control trial. In my experience writing abstracts and papers, there are two different camps here. One is that your title should, as accurately and methodologically possible, should describe the project kind of in a nutshell, right? So you want to be very specific and you want to talk about the methodology that you used. You also want to talk about like kind of the larger issue. From that camp, you get these very long titles, which is what you see here, right? So this is a theory-driven mobile messenger multimedia reminder, right? So we know a bunch just based on that. It is adherence to repeat mammography. That is the clinical issue or challenge that they're trying to confront, specifically for breast cancer. That's usually why you do mammography. And then they also let you know this is a randomized control trial. If you're not familiar with the randomized control trial, I suggest you use the Pollitt and Beck book to just look it up. These are also called RCT, and you'll see that as an abbreviation all over the place. They will also be called a randomized control trial. In a lot of scientific circles, saying controlled instead of control is a misnomer, because what you're actually saying is that we have randomized a study population into a control group and into the intervention group or groups. In this particular study, this is a really important point because we're going to see as we go through who is the control group and who are the other groups, the intervention groups. The only other thing I will say is that when you do a randomized control trial, this is considered the peak of that. If you look in the Pollitt and Beck book, it will show you that it's kind of a peak of the evidence pyramid. So it's considered like the gold standard for scientific research. The only thing above this would be a synthesis of a bunch of randomized controlled trials. It is designed to specifically identify what is better. Which one of these things is better? The control, which is usually care as normal, or the intervention group, whatever it is that we're trying to test, right? So when you're doing a randomized control trial, somebody isn't getting the new, better version of whatever it is that you're testing out. And that's okay, because we want to make sure that we legitimately test it, right? Is this better? But we also want to keep in mind for certain diagnoses, like this cancer, for example, breast cancer, these are terminal diagnoses in many cases, so they can end in death. And we need to be aware of these terminal diagnoses, and also special populations, like if we're talking about children, right, or people who are incarcerated. And we ask, what is the harm in delaying giving this intervention to everyone, right? So at some point during the study, if it turns out that this is working really well, are they going to just stop it and give it to everybody? Or at some point during the study, are they going to flip it and give half the people that were the intervention group go back to normal, and then the control group, which didn't get anything new, now gets it? So randomized control trials should start you thinking about, is this fair for everybody, given that the diagnosis may be serious? So Anyway, that's where my brain goes. And as I was telling you, that's the one camp of titles. The other camp of titles is if you're publishing something, you sometimes want it to be a little zingy and not quite so wordy. And so I kind of follow the zingy group because I believe that science should be eminently readable. I think it should be consumable by most people. And we try to make it a little too complicated sometimes, which is gatekeeping, which I am super against. So if I were to rework this title, you were to have kind of an Adrian version, I might say mobile messenger reminder for repeat mammography. Can we leverage technology to improve breast cancer screenings? Something like that, right? You're going to have both kinds. So just be aware and not intimidated that the complexity of the title doesn't necessarily relate to the complexity of the abstract. It's just a stylistic preference. So amount requested, you don't necessarily need to worry about that. But we're going to scan down here, and we always want to look at, what is the secondary field? You may remember from our first abstract we went over, the primary field is always public health, but the secondary field was like virology and immunology. This secondary field is relating to social and behavioral sciences. Interesting. When you're talking about social and behavioral sciences as a field, we're often talking about all of the other aspects of a person's life and environment and experience that influence how they either seek or receive care. So my expectation is that this is going to get into those other aspects a little bit about what the barriers are, in this case, to repeat mammography. Project keywords. Excuse me. Cancer screening, screening adherence, mammography, breast cancer, health behavior. Remember these, pardon me, these keywords are generally what you're going to be able to find this under when they actually go to publish the paper, right? So it's important. I mean, it's a very nitpicky thing, but I don't love that the cancer and screening is spelled wrong. They clearly had some difficulty with the input. It's going to warn me that potentially, as I look through this abstract, there may be some other issues going on for many people in this cohort of submissions. English may or may not be their first language, so just be sensitive to that. It does kind of make me alert, but it doesn't bias me against them because there's brilliant scientists all over the world. So there it is. Okay. One thing I love is that they sectioned it off. And as you go through the grant writing book, you're going to see that they talk about how there are specific sections that you should be aware of. It's very nice when they do this for you. They didn't do it in the one that we went over last week. So let's look through the aim. So in case you're wondering, I am right here where it says aim, colon. This project aims to investigate the effectiveness of psychological theory driven reminders sent via WhatsApp Messenger in adherence to repeat mammography screening and to identify non-adherence risk factors in breast cancer screening. I'm a theory concepts person, so psychological theory driven actually doesn't say anything to me. There is no psychological theory other than this understanding that how people think affects their behavior. That's kind of a little bit of a red flag for me. I'm really hoping that as I go through this now, I'm going to hear them say, we used Watson's theory, or we used, I don't know, Betty Newman's theory. Like, I want to know what theory. I'm really hoping that's going to be in here. Also, they used WhatsApp. Great. If there's an app that they mentioned that I don't know about, I would probably at this point go look it up. And similarly, if they stated some theory that I don't know about, I probably would look that up too, just to make sure that I'm on the same page. Project background. Breast cancer is the most common cancer in females in Hong Kong. Okay, that's important then. The Hong Kong government recently rolled out the breast cancer screening pilot program in September 2021. Adherence to repeat mammography screening for breast cancer remains a challenge. Studies have shown that psychological theory-driven tailored counseling and mail and telephone reminders are effective in improving such adherence in Western countries. Yuck. I didn't like that at all. There was too much in there. I don't know what you mean. I also want you to pull out the difference between psychological driven tailored counseling and mail and telephone reminders, those are two different interventions, right? They may connect to each other, but that's concerning. I didn't like that. However, no study has evaluated the effect of a reminder service delivered by mobile messenger in this respect, despite the rapidly developed mobile health technology in the past few decades. There is a definite research gap in terms of whether psychological theory-driven, tailored, mobile messenger-initiated multimedia reminders are useful in improving adherence to breast cancer screening in the Asian population. So clearly what they're doing, you notice they added, by the way, multimedia into that last section. They'd never mentioned multimedia before, so that's really problematic to me. What is concerning to me is that they also clearly have something in mind. If you have an intervention that you think works in Western countries, tell me that, and then tell me that you're going to test it out in an Asian population. Again, Asian population bugs kind of because that's a huge population. You're going to tell me about billions of people. Please tell me specifically about the people you're talking about. But yeah, okay. It's fairly common in science to either create and develop new knowledge or to look at that existing knowledge and figure out how we can implement it successfully in different groups or populations. So that's this kind of study. We're implementing it in a different group or population to see if it's still true. Totally valid methodological approach. I'm just having real trouble with how this is organized. Project description. The subjects, remember what I said about subjects? I don't love it. Again, as you're reading the grant, you're getting a sense not just of the proposal, but who is this scientist? I just want to scan back here. I didn't point it out at the time, but they said they want $612,000, but they're only going to spend about 5 hours a week on this. So what's happening here exactly? How invested is this person in this proposal and what they're doing? And so I don't know, I'm a little concerned. Subjects, I hate that, will be identified and recruited from an existing community-based, opportunistic, multi-cancer screening program. Opportunistic in this sense, I've never seen that used as though people understand what it means in this context. But this is a different health system, so opportunistic may mean something different over there. That gives me a little bit of pause. Females with negative mammography results, which are defined as breast imaging reporting and data system category 1 or 2, right? So these are the people that don't have any, concerns. Basically, they don't have any lumps or masses that are concerning, just that we know. That is the population. In the first round of mammography screening of the existing breast cancer screening cohort will be recruited. Wait, what? Let's try that again. They'll be identified from an existing cancer screening program. Females with no concerning results in the first round of this screening program are going to be asked to participate. Okay. Terribly written, but I understand. The subjects will be randomized to a WhatsApp reminder or SMS reminder, which is just texting, in a 1-to-1 ratio. So now there is no control group. We're just going like, this is our group, and we're going to put you into WhatsApp or text, but nobody ever mentioned text anywhere up until now, right? So you're not actually testing to see whether or not this Western model is effective here. You're taking it, you're skipping a step and going right to the, well, now which is better? I don't know. I'm really concerned. The subjects who are allocated to the WhatsApp reminder group will receive health belief model and social cognitive theory. But there you go. There you go. That's the psychological theory, right? I have a huge personal bias against the health belief model. That is just my scientific bias. So when I see that, I'm always like, this is like 1960s science, but some people really do like it. So I'm not going to let my own bias about that impact me. The social cognitive theory based model, that is Bandura. If you're wondering what that is, but you've heard of Bandura, this is the Bandura model. This is the, if you see it, you can be it thing. If you see other people model stuff, then you're like, oh, I could do that. So Bandura or social cognitive theory is really frequently used in this space where you're using social media based activities to inspire people to uptake some sort of health behavior. So that is spot on. I don't expect you to know that, but if you're reading something like this, you may want to look up health belief model, social cognitive theory, right? And that will at least let you know, okay, they're somewhat on the right track in that this is used before. Whereas those who are allocated to the texting group will just receive a text 1 month before the scheduled calendar month of the biannual mammography follow-up. Are those two things equal? I don't know if they are. There is a theory in science that if you have a randomized controlled trial and you have one group who gets some intervention and this other group just gets care as normal, it almost doesn't matter what that other intervention is. Just by merit of people getting extra attention from other humans for whatever reason is better, is preferred, and therefore they will do better no matter what. So what is the tradition in science is that you will have the intervention group, but then the control group gets something that is totally unrelated to what you're testing, but gives that same emotional bang for your buck. So if I was doing a training on diabetes health and I was doing some fun activity that I'm piloting, I'm testing out as my intervention, I might take this control group and give them, I don't know, a financial literacy workshop, right? Something totally unrelated, but they're still getting that emotional experience and attention. So they remain my control group because they didn't get any of this new information. They didn't get the intervention, but they did get a somewhat equivalent extra attention. And in my mind, getting a text once a month is not the equivalent. You could, as long as these groups don't interact with each other, you could give them nothing. You don't need to give them the texting. You could test that out later. But you know, social media messages that are tailored to you are pretty engaging. I think I'd still want to do something that's somewhat equivalent. The other issue that I'm going to bring up here real quick, and again, this is a sampling issue. I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but hopefully the Pollitt and Beck readings and also the grant writing book will give you a little bit of a hint. We have populations for our studies that can get contaminated. And you're telling me that these folks are coming from the same cancer screening program that is community-based, and you're doing one-to-one, splitting them. Are you really telling me that these people aren't going to talk? Are you really telling me that they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, that one video was hilarious, right? I loved the one with the dancing chipmunk about breast cancer screenings. The people getting the text messages are going to be like, what? You're getting like funny videos with hamsters or whatever? They're going to talk, and that contaminates your pool. They might potentially even ask to see the video. If we're sitting here on our phone, it's not like it's that hard to access, right? You may be able to be like in the clinic going, ah, this is so funny. And then the person next to you is like, hey, what's that? You've automatically contaminated your population. So I generally, when you're doing clinic community-based science, you got to do the intervention at one clinic and the control group at a different clinic. Hopefully geographically spread out enough that it's less likely that your groups are going to get contaminated. That's a huge risk on this, and I am not comfortable with the science based on that. The primary outcome is adherence to the biannual mammography screening as defined as showing up to the community center on the scheduled month to arrange for a second round of follow-up and then attending that one. Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's a very solid numeric outcome, right? How many people did it? How many people didn't? Yes, no, simple. Secondary outcomes are non-adherence risk factors. Screening identified by logistical regression analysis. Logistic regression analysis is different than linear regression analysis. So when you're doing linear regression, you're taking two things that are numeric and you are charting them. And generally, this is like a BMI scale, right? Like height is numeric, weight is numeric along the X and Y axes, and you can kind of chart out what you expect. And anybody that deviates from that, you're able to notice. And you can even say, on average, how often do people deviate from what we expect to be a linear relationship? Logistic regression is different. Logistic regression is about tracking things like demographics, because if you are Hispanic, for example, you can't be, a certain number Hispanic, you're just Hispanic, right? So we're talking about taking categories, that's the logistical, and comparing categories to other numbers of, that reflect behavior. In this case, it would be attendance, right? So you could say, what about their socioeconomic status? What about their age? What about the risk of cancer in their immediate family, or people who've died of cancer in their immediate family? Those are the categories that you would then correlate logistically against their attendance, right? So you could actually say certain people are at higher risk for non-adherence. So that scientifically makes perfect sense. It is the best thing actually in this study so far, but I will tell you that that is the minimum of what you do for a randomized control trial. Actually, almost every single study that I do, even if it's not a randomized control trial, I do this. This is baseline science. So I'm not seeing terribly complex methodologies here. I'm not seeing a qualitative component. Where are they talking to these people and actually asking them about it, right? If you're trying to understand this experience, you may actually talk to the experts. That's a good idea. That would be very easy to do in this circumstance, but I don't see any provision for that. Overall, this is an absolute no for me, given the amount of money that they're saying it would cost, and also the real big flaws in how the science is being portrayed here. Significance of the project: the findings of the study will inform policymakers regarding the optimal method of delivering reminder messages. Again, no, it isn't. It's simply saying whether or not some people liked WhatsApp, right? The optimal requires you to have multiple versions with equal exposure, and you do not have that here. Provide evidence for future formulation and implementation of evidence-based guidelines and maintaining adherence to breast cancer screening for the Asian population. Again, no, you're not doing that for the Asian population. You're doing it for one small clinic, and evidence-based guidelines based on this small of a slice of the pie, if you will, is really irresponsible. You may be adding some information to get there, but that's really overstating. Identify individuals who are at risk of non-adherence to breast cancer screening. Sure. In a small, non-generalizable population, yes, I will give you that. That's true. Facilitate healthcare costs by reducing non-attendance. Where was that ever mentioned? Am I supposed to make that mental leap that non-adherence to attendance is a problem at these clinics, and therefore somehow, yeah, I don't know. Very concerning overall. Again, you don't have to get everything that I just got out of this, but it does give you a small sense of how you should kind of critically look at these abstracts. Don't give people the benefit of the doubt. That's not what scientific review is about. And I'm not being mean, actually, although it may feel a little bit like I'm being mean. If a friend of mine who is a scientist gave me this abstract, I would be saying everything that I just said out loud in track changes highlighted in red, right? Because the goal of this is to make ourselves stronger scientists for humankind, right? So there's no like, ooh, you hurt my feelings. Feel free to really get in there and think about these things. Now, many of the questions that I just posed might be addressed in the larger grant. So reading the abstract, I would take notes and be like, I'm going to check back in on this. Are you really just doing, is that your control group? What's the deal? Are you flipping it? Are you, wait, how many people are you talking about? How are you going to prevent contamination? What's the deal? All those questions that the abstract made me think, I'm going to follow up on when I actually read the grant. And I'm going to specifically look for those pieces to be there. You mentioned the cost of clinic non-attendance, like that better be a section in there. And if it's not, it's a huge red flag for me, right? In addition to all of these other things. So that's the idea. Go through as with a critical eye to come up with some questions, look up things that seem confusing or that maybe you're not familiar with before you actually go to review the larger grant, and it will give you a huge head start because the grant might be a big meaty 15-page thing that you got to dig through. This is your short guide, and hopefully that will be helpful. So I'm going to stop recording now and I'm going to share this video with you all. I'm going to do the next one, which I believe is another virology one. I will check it out, but I'm gonna post a few of these just so that you have the opportunity to see kind of how I would work through it, and hopefully even if you don't remember everything that I say or totally understand everything I say, you've heard it now. And when you see it again in the readings, or when you hear it or see it later on in your academic training, you'll remember and it'll kind of go, oh yeah, the third or fourth time you hear it, it'll really stick and it'll make sense. So yeah, I guess that's it. Let me know if you need anything. I hope everybody's doing well. Happy Friday.